You have to stay vigilant. You're out from underneath us.
Shortly, mysterious creatures appeared out of nowhere, starting to kill mankind and causing an apocalyptic event that didn't leave many survivors. There were many theories about what happened, a bug carrying an infection or a purple haze, but they were all just rumors and nobody knew the real story. In town, Paul was looking for supplies when suddenly the sirens started wailing. He immediately ran out and made his way through the streets, hiding when necessary, moving away from any screams and bombs. As the city got covered in black smoke, Paul made it to an abandoned house on the outskirts, where he reunited with his babies, whom he now had to take care of alone. 15 years later, Paul's boys had grown into healthy teenagers. They lived in the same house and went out during the day to search for supplies, but they stayed hidden at night. As soon as the sun began to set, Joseph covered the windows and told their dog, Rocco, to get in the house. Paul waited outside until he saw Thomas come back and scolded him for being late. Thomas explained that he liked helping their neighbors, the Rose family, who had a farm. Then the three of them made sure to lock every door and window before having dinner. Paul scolded Thomas once more, saying that if he ever was late again, he wouldn't be allowed to leave the boundaries anymore. Joseph mocked his brother for it, and an argument soon escalated into a physical fight, but Paul quickly stopped them and reminded them that they were men, not animals. After dinner, Paul watched his sons play chess, but got distracted when Rocco scratched and growled at the floor. Seeing it as an omen, Paul and Thomas went downstairs and were startled by the sudden banging on the door. It seemed the creatures were trying to get in, so they immediately held the door to stop them from forcing it open. There was lots of shaking and pounding for several minutes until the creatures gave up and left. Then Thomas called Joseph out for not helping, but Joseph revealed he'd been listening to learn more. There had been 3 attempts. The first one lasted 10 seconds, the second one 20, and the last one just 1. Joseph believed the first was a test, the second the actual attempt to break through, and the third just a frustrated hit. The next day, they checked the door and saw all the claw marks on the wood. The door had lost strength, so Paul and his boys went out to look for wood to reinforce it. They brought all their findings back to the house, and while Thomas chopped the wood, Paul checked on Joseph, who was building something in the barn. After some prodding from Paul, Joseph admitted he'd been trying to develop a vehicle because he was tired of feeling confined and scared. However, he couldn't make it work. Paul was impressed and took a look, quickly making a couple of changes that finally made the car run. Excited, Paul took the teens on a ride to teach them how to drive. They went home after an hour of wandering, and Paul announced the windows still needed reinforcement, so he sent the boys to the river to salvage. Thomas got mad because he had been promised he could go to the farm today, but Paul said this was more important. The brothers left in the car, and Thomas started blaming Joseph for this, saying Paul sent Thomas too, just to protect his brother. Joseph didn't think he needed protection, so Thomas got out of the car when they passed by the farm and asked Joseph to pick him up on the way back. In the house, Paul finished reinforcing the door and took a break to smoke alone by the waterfall. As he looked around, he saw a black, creepy hole in the rocks. Meanwhile, Joseph went to the river and tied himself to the car before descending into an old abandoned ship to look for supplies. Then he looked further inside and was suddenly startled when a bunch of bugs came out from a trash pile. They flew around him and tried to reach his skin, so he had to get out of there fast. At the farm, Thomas helped the family with the chores, but it was soon revealed that his main reason for going there was the owner's daughter, Charlotte. It was clear that the teens had a crush on each other, and they went for a walk together in the field. Charlotte showed Thomas a rope tied to a tree, explaining that when she was little, she was only allowed to play outside if she was touching the tree, so she would tie herself to it to have more room to run while technically still attached. They also played a game in which they shared crazy theories about what caused the apocalypse. When it was time for Thomas to go, Charlotte gave him a tight hug. The sun was starting to set, so both boys needed to hurry up. Paul returned home and got worried when he found Rocco, but neither of his sons. Joseph got back in the car, and at first, it wouldn't start, but after a few tries, he finally got it moving. Thomas was running as fast as he could and slipped, so he ended up falling into a crevice in the ground. When Joseph came by to pick up his brother, he didn't see him around and just kept going. Once he made it home and told his dad what happened, Paul told him to get inside and lock everything up while he and Rocco looked for Thomas. In the crevice, Thomas woke up with a very sore body. Using a lighter, he began looking around the area and was shocked to see a creature reaching through a hole in the wall. It even screeched, which was heard by Paul and Rocco. Moving carefully, Thomas took out a little knife and stabbed the monster's hand, causing it to to retreat into the hole. However, when Thomas stepped back, a second creature appeared above and grabbed his face. Thomas had trouble breathing, but before he could pass out, Paul arrived and pulled the monster back, quickly killing it. After making sure Thomas was fine, Paul and Rocco found a tunnel that led right into the crevice. It was dangerous to run through the forest at this hour, so they decided to stay in the crevice until sunrise for protection and block the entrance. They could hear the creatures coming through the hole, so they got a flare ready, only for the ground to start shaking. It turned out the monsters were now moving underground and trapping the group in the crevice by covering the exit with dirt. As Rocco kept barking and the crevice wouldn't stop rumbling, Paul told his son and the dog to move back as he put the flare inside the hole that was opening in the ground. When the creatures tried to reach out, Paul created a small explosion that sadly hit him as well. In the house, Joseph heard lots of creaking and started planning. Minutes later, he sat in front of the main door with a rope tied to his chair and he fell asleep. Soon, a creature moved the wood covering a hole in the door and reached inside, making its nail grow to test if Joseph was truly asleep. When the boy didn't react, the creature came inside, only for Joseph to reveal he was pretending and pull the rope. A cage fell from the ceiling, instantly capturing the creature. Proud of himself, Joseph covered the cage with a blanket and went to sleep. The next morning, he was worried because the others hadn't come back yet, so he went out in the car to search. Meanwhile, Thomas had dug through the fallen dirt to open the entrance again and was dragging his heavily wounded dad out. Rocco came out as well and followed the noise of the car to find Joseph and guide him back to his family. The brothers immediately worked together to carry Paul to the car and then to his bed at the house. While they discussed how to proceed, Thomas finally noticed the cage and looked under the blanket, which caused the creature to go crazy. Joseph immediately put the blanket back, explaining that light hurts the monsters. Then they bandaged Paul's wounds, while Joseph explained that last night, the creature took 8 seconds to come in, the shortest time yet. He was also sure there had been a second creature that went away. Their behavior was changing too quickly, and Joseph concluded something wasn't right. Thomas pointed out that the creatures were smart. Last night, they killed a bunch in the cave, and maybe they came here for revenge because Charlotte had said they rarely went to the farm. Joseph didn't think they killed the creatures. He thought only Paul did it. To prove himself, Thomas tried to kill the creature in the cage. Joseph tried to stop him because he wanted to study it, and in the struggle, the monster came out, quickly hiding under the bed. When it finally peeked out, Rocco started barking at it, so the monster transformed into an attack. Joseph rushed to hold it down, and Thomas then cut its head off with an axe. Still wanting to learn more, Joseph took the body to the barn and started opening it up while Rocco and a bunch of bugs watched. No matter how much he cut though, he gained no further understanding of what it may be. Then Thomas told him that they should take Paul to Charlotte's farm because they had a better house and actual medicine. Joseph didn't think the roses would help him, but Thomas forced him to come along. The brothers put Paul back in the car and drove to the farm, where Charlotte's parents proved Joseph right. They didn't have enough medicine to spare, so they refused to take in someone hurt so badly. Charlotte protested, but she was ignored. However, her parents did agree to let Thomas stay, which would leave Paul and Joseph with more resources at their house. Joseph immediately walked away, and when Thomas followed him, an argument ensued in which Joseph blamed Thomas for their dad's incoming death. Furious, Thomas pushed his brother to the ground and started choking him, but when he realized what he was doing, he pulled back. Joseph immediately got in the car and drove away with his unconscious father, so Joseph joined the family at the farm. Afterward, Charlotte shared some actual good food with Thomas and showed him some of her belongings, which Thomas had never seen before. The teens shared a sweet moment and kissed, only to be interrupted by Charlotte's father, who sent his daughter to another room. On his way back, Joseph noticed the sheep running in fear and mounds of dirt everywhere, which meant the creatures were moving underground. When he made it home, he saw a path of dirt near the wall, so he feared the monsters might be underneath the house. After taking care of his dad, Joseph went to the barn and started gathering objects to make a new plan. He also started blocking all the windows, and as he moved around the house, he fell in when he stepped on a carpet. There was a hole under it, so Joseph concluded the monsters were already inside the building. At the farm, Charlotte found Thomas snooping around the kitchen. He was still worried about his dad, so he wanted to find some medicine and leave. Charlotte gave him the medicine, and he thanked her with a hug as he promised to come back, unaware that someone could overhear them. Thomas ran out, but before he could reach the gate, a farm employee pointed his gun at him, accusing him of stealing. A desperate Thomas tried to explain that Charlotte had given it to him, but the man didn't believe him. All the employees teamed up and took Thomas to the barn, where they tied him up and played some music to cover up what they were about to do to him. They grabbed Thomas's legs, and a man got ready to shoot them, but at that moment, a hole appeared under him, and he fell, failing the shot. The other men ran to check on him at the same time. A creature jumped out of the hole. In the main house, Charlotte's parents woke up when they heard a noise, only for a creature to get into the room and attack. The candle fell and immediately started a fire, while the monster jumped from the father to the mother, trying to kill them both. The father pulled it back, and the mother ran out of the room to find her daughter, but the creature jumped on her and started puking all over the woman before striking. In her bedroom, Charlotte heard how both her parents were murdered. Once the noises stopped, she came out and was horrified to discover a trail of blood, which she followed until she found the creature in the bathroom with her mother's body on its back. At the barn, the men were trying to fight off the creatures to no avail. One by one, they started to get killed, and those who managed to get out were chased too, as more creatures kept arriving. The barn soon caught on fire, and Thomas managed to knock over the furniture he was tied to. At that moment, a creature found him, but before it could attack, it was taken down by Charlotte. Afterward, the teens ran out, and Thomas saw the house on fire. Charlotte explained that her parents were gone, so they agreed to go to Thomas's place. Back at Joseph's, he threw a bunch of furniture into the hole, hoping to buy some time. Then Joseph checked on his unconscious dad and kissed his forehead before getting ready to fight. The hole in the door suddenly opened, but it was just Thomas and Charlotte. Joseph admitted he needed Thomas's help, but their conversation was interrupted by Paul finally waking up. He quickly took the medicine and told his sons to keep on fighting. Joseph shared his plan with the others, and they gathered all the gas cans they could find in the barn. The group also moved an old freezer into the house. Next, Thomas and Charlotte began reinforcing every remaining window, while Joseph made a pile of furniture and poured all the gas on it. On top, he also added every explosive object he could find and one of his dad's cigarettes, which was slowly burning down. Suddenly, the pile covering the hole started shaking. At the same time, a creature came down the chimney in the room with Paul. From the hole, another monster emerged, and when it crossed a door, Thomas ended it from behind. The creature immediately attacked back, but Thomas retrieved his knife and eliminated it. A third one went after Charlotte, and she quickly shot it down. Then the duo ran to rejoin Joseph, and they began moving the freezer again, only for the door to open behind them, revealing Paul, who was up and had ended the chimney creature. Paul took Charlotte's gun and started shooting at the floor to hit the creatures downstairs. However, the horde was huge, and soon it appeared in the corridor, running toward him. Paul kicked the first one, causing some shaking, and the weight made most of the creatures fall through the floor. A few monsters still managed to stay, but the teens ran to eliminate them before they could hurt Paul, who was impressed by the trio's teamwork. Afterward, the three teens and Rocco ran to the freezer. Instead of following them, Paul closes the door and stays to buy them some time. The group hides inside the freezer while Paul remembers the day he held his babies tightly, telling them it would be okay. A new horde of creatures bursts in, and Paul distracts them until the pile of furniture finally explodes, causing the whole house to crumble and catch on fire. The freezer starts rolling and keeps going for several minutes. When it finally stops, the teens come out and desperately search the debris for Paul, only for a creature to suddenly jump out. The group runs to the car and drives away as the monster chases them covered in fire. Charlotte's bullets don't do anything, so when the monster is close enough, she hits it with her gun and makes it fall apart. A few miles later, the group stops the car and looks at the stars, which they never saw before because they were always inside at night. The next morning, the group returns to the house and decides they don't want to rebuild the same place. After gathering any supplies they could find, they bury all their loved ones and say a final goodbye. Afterward, the three teens and Rocco leave in the car, hoping to find a new home in the farms down the valley. And with that, this story ends here. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.